Well, this is the beginning of our wonderful trip, 3-week cruise. We started in Athens, and one of the first things we saw was the Greek Parliament with the soldiers in front. Then we went to the Olympic Stadium, the only stadium in the world that's made of marble. It's from the original time, and there's Robin in the Queen's seat, and they have some graphic statues. This is the tunnel for the athletes to go onto the field, and here's some athletic champions. Here we are over at, this is the Temple of Zeus, and the Pillar of Hercules. There's Hadrian's Gate. We went to a restaurant with an olive oil press, and then they had some fun dancers. We had dinner, and oh, look, they got me in costume, and we shattered plates all over the floor. This is a picture of the Acropolis with the Parthenon and all the other buildings that are surrounding it. And of course, it has a Greek theater. The lines were long that day, and here's another shot showing how long they were. When you get to the top, you get to see the Temple of Poseidon and Athena. Next, you see Legos. That's how they assembled a lot of the architecture, was with similar things to Legos. And somebody just horsing around. There's the Parthenon, and a better shot of it. This is the Temple of Hephaestus at the base of the Parthenon. Of course, an ancient Greek soldier. Then we went on to Santorini. It's an island of Greece, where all of the homes are built onto the sides of the cliff, or into the cliff as the case may be. We visited a winery, tasted and sampled some wine, and then just cruised around the countryside where there were windmills, some in better shape than others. Here's the internals. And there was an abbey at the top of one of the mountains we went to. People live in the caves. They have homes that are built into the face of the cliff. This is the Aegean Sea. And now we move on to Kotor Montenegro. Very, very picturesque. Once again, olive oil press with Robin at the olive oil press. Harbor scene. The old city. And like a lot of the cities, they have gates and walls all around the old city. Very narrow streets. And the waiter for the day. And an old mission. Recycled bottles. Another gate into the old city. The mountains that surround all the harbors. And church after church after church. Here we have a fish farm, and here's another picture of the fish farm as we round the peninsula. This is Our Lady of Rocks Church, and this is a secret World War II submarine base. Next, we arrived in Sicily, Italy. Here's an entrance to the harbor, one of the churches, a water fountain. Kodak is even present there. Narrow alleyways. Ruins. And new being built on top of the old. And of course, a Greek theater. Every place we went had a Greek theater. Narrow streets, nice sidewalks, everything is pretty and colorful. Mount Etna erupted 2 days before we got there, and it was steaming and smoking. Next, we went to Naples and visited Pompeii. Pompeii was much larger than I had anticipated, and only 5/8 of the entire place has been excavated. And of course, another Greek theater. These are domiciles, homes. They were all destroyed when Mount Vesuvius erupted. One of the bodies that was recovered. There were signs outside the houses, and if you were prosperous, it showed how well endowed the male is. There's also mosaics in the better homes, and everybody had pots, and they had stone streets, and more mosaics in the richer houses. This was their forum marketplace, guarded by a centaur and then a centurion. Next, we visited a cameo shop in Naples where they were actually making jewelry. Here we have Robin looking cute and full of amore. This is a mall inside an old palace. This is their opera, a castle at the harbor, and now we move on to Barcelona, Spain. This is the outside of the Olympic Stadium. This is the harbor area and the beach. Picture of us touching the water of the Mediterranean. This is a church they've been trying to build for 100 years, and it'll be completed sometime probably in the next 30. And then just a lot of interesting architecture. That is the last bullfighting ring in Barcelona. More architecture, more churches. And then we went to the Rock of Gibraltar. And that's the rock, with water coming out of it. There are churches and mosques. And then we have a picture of Santa Claus down there, our cruise ship, and two monkeys. The Barbary monkeys were all over the place. We went into a cave and we saw, a light show inside the cave. But then we come back out and the monkeys came right up to us, and they were very, very cute, and people were feeding them. This was a mortar that was built into the rock and shot rocks out into the harbor. This is the harbor right behind the rock with their cable cars. Next is Marseille, France. Marseille, like many ports, is surrounded by mountains. Here we have sumo wrestlers lifting shipping crates. The very decorative graffiti around town. And the architecture is once again very interesting. The Church of the Seafarers. Very ornate inside, but it's all dedicated to the seafarers and the shipping. They have the ships hanging down from the ceiling and the life preservers. It's all for the blessing of the mariners. That island is the Chateau d'If, which is featured in Alexander Dumas' Count of Monte Cristo, where he was incarcerated. That is the French regional office that Robin is in front of, and that ain't a lot of bull. More sculptures. A closer look at the Parliament building, the church. A last look at Marseille from the port, and we're on to Genoa, Italy, which is a beautiful and colorful town. The pirate ship is next to where Robin stayed when she was here in business. Here's a view of our ship from a balcony. Interesting architecture of the housing. Almost every city has an Arc de Triomphe. An interesting fountain with the head of Medusa. Christopher Columbus's house, celebrating Christopher Columbus. That is Garibaldi. Now a picture from the harbor. A castle overlooking the harbor. And a lot of harbor shots showing the different architecture and the colorfulness. And a lot of motorcycles and scooters. It's amazing to see how colorful the entire town is. Genoa has adopted the flag of St. George as its own. Here we have a castle overlooking the harbor, ornate buildings, and colorful, colorful, colorful. A basilica, and the port as we're just about ready to leave. The ferries have Superman and Warner Brother characters all over them. Next we visited Pisa, and of course the Pisa means the Leaning Tower, and there she is. Here's mosaics on the front of the church. And the Leaning Tower itself was not a religious thing, it was just the bell tower for the church, which the ground underneath wasn't necessarily secure, and it started to shift and lean. We went on to Rome, which was our longest day for tours. About 10-hour tour, all on uneven pavement. Here we are at the church, which is the Cathedral of St. Peter in Chains. There's the chains. There's a better look at them. And St. Peter is buried underneath that. Now we're in the Roman Forum. That's where all the business of the old days was conducted, marketplace, such. And there's some old pillars. They're still just laying on the ground. Some sculptures. Again, a l'Arc de Triomphe type of thing. And this is the innate or ornateness of the inside of the arch. And from there, we went to the Colosseum, which I was surprised that it looks great from the outside, but you get inside, there's no seating or anything. It's all pretty much decimated from all the years of abuse. Here we have in front of the, well, it's the Vatican, and a lot of statuary on the outside, and then you get in and it is very, very ornate there also. Supposedly it's the largest basilica or church in the Catholic faith. And a lot of popes are interred inside the Vatican. Very, very beautiful, very colorful. There's the Swiss Guard, and that's the Pope's apartment. And that is the Sistine Chapel there in the background. We moved on to Crete, and we saw the ruins of Knossos. Supposedly, what you're seeing on this main level is the palace, which had a 1,000-room labyrinth built into it, supposedly with a minotaur in the center. But it's just remarkable that these are 3,000 to 4,000 years old. And now we're going to go over to the throne room. And that's the throne of King Minos, who was the head of the Minoan civilization. Here we have their steps, which are actually their theater area. And this is a fountain inside the town. Next, we went to Kusadasi, Turkey. Finally, I am in Asia. Whee! Now, Ephesus is their ancient ruin site, and of course, it has a Greek theater. But the interesting thing is they had clay pipelines, so they had fresh water thousands of years ago. And here we have pillars and statuary. From what we could see, the Turkish people have done a lot to maintain and refurbish this area, considering that it is 3,000 years old. The tall building in the background is the oldest library in the world that you can actually get to. And different pieces of architecture and mosaics, carvings, and Medusa. Sample of Greek writing, and the most important spot, the toilets made of marble. Here we are in front of the library. And some carvings on the library. The top of the pillars and the ceiling. Very ornate. And a row of columns. This is a cemetery of ornate crypts, and of course, next is the Greek theater. In Kusadasi, we visited a rug-making factory, which makes it from silk. These are silkworm cocoons. They get a mile's worth of thread from one cocoon. Next, we moved on to Istanbul, which has an amazing number of mosques and minarets. But here is a bank of ATM machines. Note that the minarets almost look like missiles. Here is the Spice Bazaar, very, very modern, and a lot of neat things, a lot of colorful items. But though we spent a little bit of time in here, we went out into the street where the real people are, not the tourists, and that was much more interesting. We moved from there to Mykonos, Greece, and we didn't take a tour that day. We just went around the city ourselves. Very, very picturesque. Narrow alleyways, but all bright, colorful with white, blue. Had the best calamari ever there. And we just looked around, and then there were a number of windmills. Must have been a wind-powered civilization at one point, but very, very pretty. And that pretty much wraps up our trip as the sun sets on our cruise.